Hello, everyone. My name is Stephen Drew, and I'm calling. What am I on about? I'm going live from the Architecture Social, and I'm just about getting a call, and I've turned that off because we're live. We're live streaming, so no one call me at the moment. Otherwise, I'll have to cut you off. But welcome, everyone. It's a Wednesday, and I'm super, super excited to talk about something which I saw online, and it made me think, I need to talk about this because how often in your searches have you heard that you need to specialize in a niche? If you're setting up a business, you need that niche. People need to remember you. You need that unique selling point. You need that skill set, which is going to differentiate yourself. Now, it's all well and good, being strong in one area. However, what I've seen is people who specialize in certain sectors of architecture, it doesn't mean that necessarily they're going to get a job because maybe as things change, that sector or that unique skill set, that thing that they have is no longer needed. And that can leave people in a stressful situation. Now, I'm going to expand upon what I mean. And I've got my trusty graph here. So we'll all go through it. But here we go. I'm just going to check that everyone is logging in. Here we go. Chris is here. Chris, dodgy connection. All you can see is 21. Well, I hope it gets better in a bit. You let me know, Chris, if it's still a dodgy connection. And worst case, I will set it off again. All right. So we're going to keep talking in the meantime. So, what do you think, guys? Do you think specializing and having your niche is really important? Well, I'm going to jump straight into it and talk to you about what I see. So, for anyone that's not seen my content before, I've worked in architectural recruitment for the last 8 years. And what I've seen is the people who send their CVs and portfolios in, the ones that struggle to get the job interviews, as well as the ones that go through and get jobs as soon as possible. It's people who get the jobs, people get all the interviews. So, hey, Sean, it's working. Excellent. That is good to know. And Gregory, it's good to see you here as well. So, what can we learn from the people that get the jobs or do not struggle as much in between jobs? What do they have? Well, I'm going to show you the common traits that I see and some things to think about in your career. Okay. So, I've got a graph. I've got a graph again. I was teased by one or two friends last time, but I think it's really good to have a graph. Okay. So before we jump into it, I want you to think about, just bear with me. You got to humor me for a second. Okay. We're going to talk about your career. Okay. Now, your career is full of many different things. And I've kind of broken it down into what I think generally when jobs come in and when people have careers in architecture, how that's broken down, right? What is involved in a career in architecture? So you start, you're going to get your qualifications. You're going to start as a part one, you're going to get qualified. But part one, part two, part three aside, let's break down what that job entails. Okay. So when you start in a architecture practice, you're probably going to be plonked onto a job in the commercial or transport or retail or residential. That's called sectors, right? What sector of the architecture market you're in. Some people focus more on one sector because they joined architecture practice and they build up lots and lots of experience in that sector. And that can be really handy for other jobs in that sector. So, what do I mean by that? If you are a residential architect and residential is booming, there's loads of developers who want to build residential buildings, then chances are when you look for a job, that's going to be really handy. Now, you might actually start in infrastructure. Hopefully, I've spelt it correct. You might jump in infrastructure. It's really interesting, right? Now, you can do really well in the infrastructure sector and you can get jobs which are well paid. But that experience, right, is going to be more specific to the infrastructure sector. Yeah. Transport architects are going to be hired by companies like TFL. They're going to struggle, though, getting a job at a large scale residential house builder or an architecture practice, which does predominantly residential. Okay. So, what you tend to find is that, as well as that, So we just covered briefly sectors, okay? When you join an architecture practice, you're probably going to use different software. Now, software is probably going to be used more at the start of your career. And when you go further in your career, you're going to get other skills as well, which we're going to touch upon. But you might join a practice which uses CAD. And then we'll use the analogy that we used before. So you join an architecture practice with residential and you start working in CAD. You'd like to work in BIM, but this architecture practice uses CAD for now, okay? As well as that, when you join this architecture practice, what you do on the residential team, you're in charge right now of projects, parts of projects, and projects at earlier REBA stages. So what do we have here? Oh, that's my terrible drawings. But so we have what? 0 to 7. These are all the REBA stages. This is what we use in the UK, right? So you might find that you predominantly do the front end REBA stages 1 to 3. Okay, cool. Now, over the course of your career, you're going to pick up loads and loads of skills, which is awesome. You're not expected to learn them straight away, but you start working on UK building regulations, which is awesome. You haven't had the chance yet to do business development. You start, you're just starting in your career, right? But maybe you do a bit of client facing. Oop, I got it twice, but that's fine. Yeah. So you're building up your career on that front. Okay. Now let's pretend the clocks go back. Yeah. Let's pretend the clocks go back and the start of the pandemic hits. Okay. COVID comes in. Lots and lots of jobs are under jeopardy. Right. So let's say that actually there was a few people on the front end team. You might find that now you're looking for a job, right? So with this skill set on the market, you're going to be immediately relevant to other companies who have that skill set. So what do I mean by this? And I'm going to get my color now. So you'll see that there's lots and lots of jobs online. So let's see, is that a good, yeah, that's a good different color. Okay. So what you might find, so say now this person with this skill set, all right, and they might have 2 years in industry or 3 years or whatever, is then suddenly looking for a job. They're going, oh my gosh, I've got to look in the job market. I've got to find something that's really relevant for me quickly because it's the pandemic, right? And so there's a few companies which are looking for commercial. And good news, looking for residential. That's great because residential is a good sector, right? And then, but the companies use Revit. They don't use CAD. Ah, damn. And they're really looking for someone who's done all of these sectors. Uh-oh. So, and then as well as that, they want someone with UK building regulations. Whoop. And the client facing would be cool. Great, got that. Okay. Okay. So in this scenario, you probably would get an interview because you've got a few of the skill sets there, which is great. However, let's pretend in another scenario that you are a retail architect and you've worked in retail all your years. You're like an expert and, at front end stages. Yeah. You've got the UK building regulations and you've got a bit of management. Yeah. You've got the CAD. Now, the problem is that the same job that other guy went for before in this analogy. Here we go. You're not going to have all of the skill sets. Okay. You're not going to have all of the skill sets. And then what does that mean? You might be not asked for the job. You might not be asked for that job. Now, you might say to me, Steve, that's just one job. And you're right. And this analogy that I gave was earlier in their career. But the point of what we're talking about today, and let me bring the camera back. Let me bring the camera back to me, is that I want to make sure that you are future proof because having a niche is good. But imagine if you were that guy or that lady who's got 10 years of Revit experience, 10 years of retail experience. You've got a bit of Revit. You haven't got that much, but you've got CAD. Chances are, during the pandemic, the main big sectors which we're looking was residential, especially modular, data centers. Okay, that's a new sector. And as well as that, not so much commercial. But so if you think about it in what we talked about, so residential was big and data centers were big. A retail architect might struggle. Okay. So that's what I want everyone here to think about when they're looking for the job. So, okay, you could say to me, Steve, it's not as easy as going into an architecture practice and saying, I want to work on retail for 2 years and then move over to another sector. And you'd be right, because it can be a little bit difficult in that. But let's go back to the graph again and talk. It's not just about sectors, because what I want you to think about is the sectors are quite important. Software is getting important as well, understanding a BIM environment, using Revit, using ArchiCAD. That's really important. But there's other skills which you can build up so that overall you become a well-rounded and have much higher chance of being employed. So we're going back to my trusty graphs again. So what do I mean by that? We're going to use a different analogy. We're going to talk about an architect with 10 years experience or something. Okay. So let's have a look at my graph. Now, what I'm on about is, think of this concept of skills stacked, right? Because when you're 10 years in your career, you sometimes, or I find being observational, is that you get these amazing architects who are really good at specific stuff. So in this analogy, I've used the hotel expert, and it could be that this person has done so much of hotels. That's one of their strongest skill stacks. And yes, that's going to be really desirable for someone in hotels. But here you can see that maybe they're super experienced on front end Reba stages, and they've got a bit of CAD, they've got a bit of team leading, and there's other skills down here which is not used as much. Now, if the job is in the hotels area, or maybe the company's looking for a hotels director, you're going to think, great, this guy's going to get the job. And he probably would have a good chance. But what if there was one or two other skills which are really important to the job that the guy doesn't have, or the lady doesn't have? Okay. And that's where I want us to all start thinking about a broader skill stack with one or two specialisms. Okay. So this is a broader skill stack. So compared to the other one, you can see here that this person has got all-round experience on all these things. So whereas if you can see the shape of this is like this, where you can see this person actually has a large wide base and then has some specialisms that go up. So what do I mean by that? Over the course of this person's career for the last 10 years, they've done hotels. They haven't done as much hotels as the other person, but they've also done residential. Okay. And they've seen all of the Reba stages. Okay. Maybe not as good as the design stage. Maybe doesn't have as much experience in the design stage. But this person's seen hotels, done some residential at Reba stages 1 to 5. Okay. And as well as that, they're not an expert used in BIM software. They're not an expert in ArchiCAD, not an expert in Revit, but they've got it. And they've done a bit of CAD as well. And on top of that, this person has done a lot of business development. Okay. So what that means is when the chips are down during the global pandemic, during a recession, this person is more likely going to fit into more jobs on the wider market, which can mean that this person is slightly more versatile. Okay. They could be exactly the same smart level and all that. I'm just talking about niches. Okay. And it's fantastic that if the hospitality sector is going through the roof, yes, this hotel architect has all the opportunities, and it's a buzzing sector, and they've got lots and lots of chances, even with the front end Reba stages, because the hotel market in this concept is doing really well. However, what do we know happened during the pandemic? The whole hospitality sector was struggling. And therefore, that this person, in what really happened during the pandemic, struggled. They're really smart. They're amazing. If you're an architectural practice and you're hiring and you need someone to build a hotel, get that amazing design, this person is going to be awesome. But what if you don't need that? Because the hotel sector's down, and in your architectural practice, suddenly the hotel team has less work, and actually there's work in the residential team, and you need that person. Well, if this person's on the job market, they're more likely to get the job because they've got a broader average than this person who's specialized. Yeah, you know. Oh, I'm terrible at drawing. You have to forgive me, and I'm doing it live. So that's my thoughts on it. So let's bring the camera back, and then I'm going to get all the comments here as well. So we're talking. You can drop me a thought. You can drop me what you think about the analogy. Okay. But basically, you want a broad set of skills with some specialisms. And I think it's riskier to have specialisms which are massive specialisms in one particular areas. So let's bring up a few of the comments and we can go through things. So give me 1 second. Give me 1 second to do that. So Gregory thinks, I like to have a niche and be a generalist at the same time. Yes, exactly, Gregory. If you, for instance, have a broad set of skills and then you have one or two specialisms, chances are that broad set of skills is going to be relevant to a lot of places, and those specialisms are going to show that you can do certain things. It's going to show that you would excel in certain areas, you know? Oh, you mentioned as well, BIM is a method and Revit is a product name. Exactly. So, yes, I'm sure that's to do with John's comment there about BIM and Revit. But let's put that aside, John. And thank you for comment, Gregory, because I want to talk about niches again. What I want to do is for everyone to think in their current career, how can they future proof themselves? How can they make themselves really, desirable in any architecture market? So if you don't need to be the expert, but if you've got CAD and you've got BIM and you've worked on residential and commercial, now in my opinion, they're the two sectors which generally one goes up, one goes down, and there's usually jobs in those sectors, and you've done a little bit of hotels as well. You can't do everything, right? But if you imagine you've got that, and I think a really important one, which I would encourage every architect here to do, is just do all REBA stages, because that future proofs your jobs. Because imagine just front end. Well, we're talking about that, and I'm going to bring it back to me. Just so you know, front end designers, they always struggle during the pandemic. It's the all rounders that do really well. Technical focused architects are usually in demand as well because buildings on site, project management skills, all that is really, really valuable. Front end designers are valuable, but you typically in less demand. I get less roles on for front end designers. So keep yourself safe and be an all rounder and do REBA stages 0 to 7. Okay, let's bring it back up. All right, cool. So imagine you've done that, and during your time as well, you've got UK building regulations, you've done a bit of management, you've done a bit of client facing. Yeah, that's going to be really, really useful. So you already are tipping the odds in your favor. Yeah, you're making yourself really employable. And I think that's really, really useful. Alex talks about an excellent question. Is there an issue of going too broad too fast? At what stage in your career do you think you should branch out? So sectors are going to be the hardest one to move away from because probably in an architecture practice, you're going to be put on one or two teams. But you can make yourself quite versatile, pick understanding one or two pieces of software and always going along with the flow. So if you're in CAD, you should make, for instance, an effort to go to BIM. But what I would say to Alex is, what you can do without causing a shuffle in an architecture practice is you can always ask the architecture practice for more responsibilities on the team, doing administration, helping out on projects, maybe doing a little bit of BIM, BIM management, if that's your thing. Maybe it could be going on site all the time, practicing client facing. These are skills that you can constantly develop without moving in teams, which are going to make you so valuable and so employable, And I think that's really important. And if you find that you're getting stuck on certain REBA stages, that might be a good one for you to move to different REBA stages. You say, look, I really enjoyed REBA stages 1 to 4. I want to do 5, 6, 7. So, Alex, I hope that's helpful. Always, and down the line, you can ask to move to different sectors, but in the short term, you can work on broadening your skill sets in the project that you're in, and that makes you really employable. Another example, Alex, could be that, say now you're an architect and you qualify and you've got like 1 or 2 years, you could ask to manage or mentor a part one and part two, and that's going to give you a little bit of management experience, which you didn't have before, and that is increasing your skill stack because you can say that you've done management on top of the sectors that you worked on, and I think that will really help. Bon dropped a message. Hello, Stephen. Analogy 2022. When your architect says for you for the third year in a row, I've changed. Please give me another project. Yeah, exactly, Vaughn. Really good to see you. And we'll have to have a catch up soon. But I think it is healthy at that point to ask for a little change, ask for a little variety, and always go back to thinking about how can I broaden my horizons? Generally, and I can't prove this is anecdotal, but in terms of recruitment, I think a lot of the very good architects that I see working, maybe they've got residential, but perhaps they've done a bit of hospitality as well. Or maybe they've done 1 or 2 mixed use projects and they've done commercial as well as residential. A retail architect is always who's got 10 years doing retail is going to struggle to go to residential because the UK building regulations or the compliance for housing regulations and so forth. I mean, you guys will tell me more because you're practicing, but that's not going to apply. And that's going to be difficult to combat in an interview. And you don't want to be in that position where you're trying to convince someone about the sectors in the job interview. The best time to try and get different sectors is when you're in the job that you're currently in. Okay, so we've got 1 or 2 other points here as well. Sean, in case I didn't bring it up, I agree, a niche market, but a generalist architect and team project manager is the right way to go. Thank you, Sean, for contributing that. I completely agree. So I am going to, well, we're beasting through this at the moment. I think we generally covered the point, but I'm going to open it up again to the audience and ask 1 or 2 more questions. Feel free. I'm going to be here for the next 20 minutes or so, and we can talk about any questions you have. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through an existing job that I'm working on, and we're going to pick it apart. And I'm going to tell you what skills are transferable and what would work really well for it. Danielle says, I have a lot of sector experience. How can I push for higher level positions? Experience seems not to be enough. Okay. Good question. So I would bring it back to, obviously, I haven't got your CV here right now, so I'm speculating as well. But how can you be really valuable to a company if you've got lots of sectors experience, but how can you push for higher level positions? So, I mean, a good example, Danielle, and obviously I haven't got context because I haven't got your CV here, is talking about to add value. Okay, so one of the most criminally underrated skill sets is business development, client facing, and basically being able to pitch in front of clients, maybe design team, confidence. Okay, now I'm freestyling that, so I'm sure we could word it a little bit better, but you get the general gist. So in my experience, how do you add your value to a business? You get comfortable working with the client and you foster that relationship. You nurture that relationship. You help generate business for the architecture practice. So architects who generally have business development skills and work closely with a client and have a relationship there will struggle less than someone that does not have a relationship with a client, because that's powerful. And if you can bring in business for a company, they're unlikely to let you go. So how do you build business with a client? Maybe you develop a good working relationship at an architecture practice where you are, and you spend a lot of time delivering that client's projects. And if they move to different companies, then you can follow them around. So, quickly, how do you do that? You can probably, as well as asking your boss for that exposure, just as once you get in front of a client, if you deliver on what they want and you nurture that relationship and you try and be really social with them, you try to develop a professional relationship as well as I don't want to say a friendship, but a personal relationship, then that can work really well. It's all about delivering, and all of my clients that still work with me, I have to deliver for. But actually, as well as that, if you can get along and you can have a bit of fun with the client, or you can connect them on a personal level, then you're going to have that emotional connection. So you're going to deliver factually, so logically, you're the right person to work on their projects. But then emotionally, they think that you're a fantastic fit because you're fun to work with while you deliver the goods. So to answer your question in a roundabout way, um, Danier, have a look at building relationships with clients. Have a look at how you can bring in work for the business. And as well as that, maybe there are some other ideas here, which I put down, such as, taking more management responsibility, managing part ones and part twos, coaching, mentoring, and just doing things a little bit outside of what the job description entails, going above and beyond, doing that extra bit that's going to add real value. Okay. Cool. So I'm going to keep you for 1 or 2 minutes, and I'm going to go through a job that we can talk about, and then I will unpack um, the kind of the skills and transferable skills which are going to be relevant for the job. And that'll give you a flavor of how it currently, how you would approach it and what would be the right person for the role. Last comment that's popped up here is Gregory says the design of buildings in the UK 0 to 7 would be a good focused area. I feel biased towards education, coaching, mentoring, professional and career support. Gregory, it's very good to do coaching and mentoring. I'm sure as you'll agree that it's a two-way thing. You impart wisdom, but you also learn a lot yourself. So don't worry. I think that's a good bias to have. Okay, so now here I've got a job description. Okay. We can't really see it. So I'm going to get rid of that. I'll talk about it now. So there's currently a BIM consultancy which I'm working with, and currently they are looking for a project manager or a digital delivery person. Okay, digital delivery manager. Okay, what the heck does that mean? Okay, don't worry. It's very hard to find someone who already does digital delivery. So it's not about that. It's actually looking for someone who is currently in architecture. Maybe they're a BIM specialist and has done a bit of project management, and they're currently excited to do something different. Maybe they've got stuck in their current position. So the right kind of person for that role is someone that has a wide variety of skills, someone that perhaps has done project management, someone that has worked in a CDE environment, which I believe stands for Common Data Environment, someone that's familiar with that, and someone that's maybe gone stuck in with the BIM model. They've done a bit of BIM coordination. Okay. So there's a wide variety of skills there, which would be applicable for the role. But actually, someone that's done a little bit of BIM coordination, a little bit of BIM management, and a little bit of general project experience and architecture is going to be a great fit. However, in this analogy, for this digital delivery expert, someone who's just done project management, they're probably not going to be the best fit because they this person, this that would be right for the role, needs to have a little BIM experience. So in this scenario, the all-rounder is the person that's probably going to get the interview and probably is going to be the right fit. So you see that as well. You'll see that a lot. And generally, I think if you worked in residential or commercial sectors, you will find that a lot of jobs are you can actually apply for a lot of jobs. And to put it specifically, the rebus stages are so important. So as Gregory said, I think that if you have rebus stages 0 to 7, chances are that's a really good base ground. And if you've got residential and you've got commercial, maybe you could apply for an education job. Probably the person that's done education is going to have the first appeal when someone's looking for the CVs, they're going to match education. But the fact that you've worked in a few sectors and you've done all of REAP stages, that's pretty good. And you might be more desirable than the education architect with just front end 0 to 3 REAP stages. So we'll summarize things up, but short and sweet. And hey, my pleasure. And Gregory, no problem. So short and sweet. Have a think next time the guru says have a niche. Expand upon that and think what they really mean. Do they mean just have a niche? Or do you think that all of the successful business people out there actually have a strong base of skills with one or two specialisms. See, in my experience, the people who get to the top of businesses, they've done everything. They've done all the Reba stages. They've worked as a manager. They joined the company perhaps from the ground up, or they set it themselves. They win work, yeah, as they've done maybe the late nights once or twice, but they've seen a little bit of how the business is developed. They nurture people. They have a wide variety of skills. Maybe they have one or two languages under their belt, but and perhaps they've seen one or two sectors. And then at the end of their career, they go, "Oh, do you know what? I've done a bit more residential than anything else." So you can you can say that I do residential, but I guarantee you, if you look at all the directors and managing directors of company, they have such vast, wide variety of skills, and that really is why they are at the top of their ladder. And then maybe they have one or two specialisms there. And I guarantee you that on the other side of the coin, you can still get awesome people who specialize in very narrowly in one particular sector. However, there's always that risk should a sector change or should the architecture industry go one way or another, that if the situation is not great, there's not many jobs or that sector, there's no need for those buildings to be built. There's no need anymore for retail because it's all online. That person's going to have a hard job, a time finding another job. So don't leave yourself exposed. Have a think about how you can, let's get the graph up one last time. Have a think about how you can develop a wide variety of skills across the board and bring everything up rather than bring in one area. Yeah. Don't be rushing to do that. Build this area up, build this up, build it all up, and then you can specialize in one or two. Because this is much more employable. Oop, you get it. This is much more employable than someone who is just in this area. Yeah. Yeah. Just like that, with a little bit. It's not as employable as this. So on that note, Miro's messaging me. I've got people messaging me here. I've really enjoyed this live stream. It's always a learning curve going live, kind of feeling it out, but I hope that's helpful. And I enjoy an unfiltered chat. You know, I'm not interested in scripts. I'm telling you everything that I've learned over the years from my anecdotal experience. Whether or not you apply that knowledge, that's totally up to you. Okay. Do not get yourself caught out. Have a think about it and broaden that skill set. Bring the base of your skills up. All right. On that note, I'm going to leave it there. Feel free to drop me a message. If you found this useful, and share it with a friend or a colleague if you think they're in that position and they might benefit from this. Have a fantastic Wednesday. I'm going to go back to my job now and work, and I'll see you soon. I'm sure there'll be a topic for next Wednesday. Take care, everyone. Bye bye.